they know much more about environment than all of us here. That's where our communication has been, where we want to aware them of the legalities of the system, where we can oppose these projects, these harmful projects legally. And our effort has been to educate them, or educate all of us actually, on the legal aspects of it, because most of the people know the projects are bad, but they don't know how to fight against them. So that has been our aim, to make them legally aware. So the recent thing, the EIA, we've been talking about it since 2 or 3 months, more than that actually. So that has been our aim, to make people aware of the system in general, because that's how we can fight against these projects, harmful projects. Thank you.
Okay. So just like I would like to just know that we were talking about volunteer earlier. So just what is the age group that you get mostly volunteership members you get it? Like, is it a mid-age or youngsters? Are youngsters contributing towards this thing? So like if you could share this thing with us.
It's solely, for now it has only been youngsters, but we've taken help from people who have tons of experience as well, who have spent their lives in protecting environment in these causes. So, but our entire thing is solely youngsters centric. So yeah.
Okay. And like yeah. So what do you think about the education sector? You know, this education sector are providing proper environmental education to the students from the starting? As we can see earlier, it's not education are not mainly focused on this environmental or any other issues related to the society. So how it would be helpful if we start from the from the standard one, so we can just groom up them related to the issues. So it would create a huge impact. So what do you think on this?
See, my take on the education system in India overall is a little negative, because first of all, though, I don't think that these are things that you can teach in a top-down manner, as in the way our classroom setup is right now, where there is a teacher who is assumed to know more than you do, and then there are kids usually, and most often than not, the classrooms are overcrowded, so there is no scope of one-on-one interaction between the teacher and the student. That is first and foremost a problem to begin with. But then again, this entire notion that that education can be imparted through a textbook, and only through a textbook, and only in a wall in a four-walled room. This is a very antiquated understanding of the word education. And not only that, first of all, though, we don't learn see, there are many ways in which we learn. There is a whole self-learning that happens for each and every one of us. We learn from our parents, we learn from our peers, we learn from our elder cousins, aunts, uncles, from our neighbors. So there's a lot of learning that happens as we grow, and then there is a lot of learning that we do by ourselves by observing. So what happens is, when you're put into this classroom paradigm, and when you're told that only what you read in a book and only what your teacher is telling you is education, there itself you have sort of destroyed the entire self-learning process, and a process where a child is encouraged to learn by asking questions, to learn by observation, to learn by interacting with the world around them. And environment is one such thing that you can never learn from a textbook. You need to interact. You need to go out and interact with nature in order to understand what nature is. So this entire belief that एक additional textbook डाल दो बच्चों के curriculum में जो environment के बारे में पढ़ाएगी, that is really not going to work. That is seriously, and that is an entirely misplaced notion कि school में हम environment पढ़ा सकते हैं, आप नहीं पढ़ा सकते हो, because and not only that, your current education system is very centered around job market, and the sole aim of getting educated is to get a degree, is to get a job. This is already set in your system. This is already what your system is geared towards, towards. So until unless you shift that and break that system, there is no education that can be had within this system. So I really don't think that this is how we should, as a society, we should be approaching the problem of environmental ignorance in the people around us.
Also, to add on that, there is also a huge contradiction about what we teach our children. On one side, we see teachers telling children from first standard that trees are important, water should be safe, etc., etc. But at the same time, we teach our children that their main aim of their life should be of luxurious life where they have 2-3 cars. This cannot go simultaneously. We need to really be firm on what sort of development we want, and what type of consumer culture that we are in right now. We have to tackle that first. These two things cannot go hand in hand. Like, you can't teach your children to save planet, to save trees, to save this that, and tell to to teach them or to promote them or to encourage them to have this luxurious lifestyle where they have 3 or 4 cars or 2 or 3 motorcycles. That cannot happen.
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen. First of all, though, your unlearning needs to begin at home, with your parents, and especially the middle class. If you see how the middle class raises their kids, right? I mean, from bachpan se, there's so much pressure to become an IITian and get your degrees from IIMs, get that six figure wala salaries, and move to, if possible, then move to some other white country and get a job with Google or Facebook. I mean, isn't that how the middle class is raising their kids today? So, and not only are they raising them to believe that that is what success looks like, and that is what they should be aiming for all the time, and if they don't aim for that, then they are failures. Not only is that happening, but the entire aim of pushing your kids into private education has become to gain that lifestyle, to get that lifestyle, and that lifestyle itself is a problem. It's a factor that is causing the environmental damage in the first place. So how do you expect this system that is geared towards environmental, that is causing the environmental damage, to actually teach children care for the environment? So there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen first. There's a lot of dismantling of the school system and the university system that we have right now in India before you can even begin to talk about environmental conservation. Maybe Ruhi can add to this.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point about how the education system works in India. And I know some of you must have read environmental science, and the only parts that I remember from my school are that you should not cut trees, and possibly like what is air, water pollution in definitions, but not anything beyond that. And now things have evolved so much in terms of what climate science is. What is the impact of climate change on our everyday lives? It's evolved much more to that. So I second that. Meher, do you want to add something?
So yeah, so I just want to give an example of something that I had seen recently, which will actually build on these points that they had mentioned, that it all stems from this concept of globalization that we have. Because if you actually see the education system that is based on, that we are basing the whole idea of it is for making money for the capitalistic lifestyle, and it all stems from that. Whereas if you actually see the villages and how they function, like exactly like Radhika had mentioned, they actually have their own communities. Yeah. And they learn from real people. They learn from their elders. And it follows through till the end of their life. Like they are already seeing real life examples of people leading with good intentions and with good thoughts. And they see a family growing. Whereas with the globalization aspect that has come in, you're actually watching TV about a product, that's actually going to make you look fairer, which is going to give you a job. So and they say this is how you can get your job if you look like this. So these small things are so important that if children are watching TV screen which is going to advertise for these kind of products, you're going to be thinking about it. So no matter how the education system is, you're still going to be wanting products like that. So that's why it has to be incorporated on a larger scale, I feel, not just through this. I think that whole concept of localization needs to be brought into idea, and then then the education to help the environment naturally comes from these kind of things that are happening.
Yeah, truly, I agree with you guys. As Rishikesh said, both the situation can't go hand in hand. We have to compromise some of the other things. I request Komal Dadas to please take over this session. Komal, Komal, are you there on line?
Yes, Chivita, I'm there. Yeah, thank you, Chivita. Hello.
Thank you,
me?
Komal. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Now I would like Yash to just a second. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Sorry for the interruption. Actually, I am just lagging network issue. So I would like to hand it over to Yash and his team further to talk about the topics which they have decided to discuss in the session, so that further we can take the questions on the discussion we go ahead with. Will that be fine, Yash?
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah, you might have decided on some of the topics to be discussed. So we will go ahead with that because it's being a question answer session from the beginning. So moreover questions are being answered. And now I would hand over to you so that you can take it further with your discussion. And at the end of the session, we can again go ahead with the questions from the audience if they have any. Okay?
Sure. This was a very interesting way of actually starting with questions and answers. I mean,
Yeah.
frankly, hats off to you guys for that. I think we would like to talk about the EIA campaign that we have been handling for a while now, and just cautionary note out there and a big disclaimer. Let India Breathe is in a way just an enabler in the whole campaign. We have had like beautiful partners from across the country, be it National Alliance Movement or Hind Dhara or People's Union of Civic Liberties and the RA Conservation Group, Muse Foundation, and like plenty of such beautiful organizations from across the country. Even of course Youth for Swaraj and Swaraj Abhiyan and things like that. The thing I'll just start it off. How we came across it. We saw this notification by the Ministry of Environment and Forest. They want to basically amend the environment impact assessment notification and basically get a new law with a lot of amendments. And this is just basically diluting the whole purpose of having an environment check and balance out there. So many things being diluted. I mean, I think any amount of hours of a webinar will be less for that because it's an 80-page notification. I think Radhika can in a bit get back to the dilutions. But as soon as we saw that, we realized that okay, this is not something that some people sitting in Bombay, Bangalore, and Delhi should only talk about. And looking at the lockdown and how tribals, farmers, fisher folk, and indigenous communities and forest dwelling communities, all of them are locked down, right? It's not like, I mean, a lot of us do have a privilege of accessing the internet and doing so many other things. At least we have homes. We don't depend on on the very immediate harvest. We have a market system in place that protects us. But when they are trying to protect their lives, every day is a new Pandora's box for them. We realize that if their voice cannot be heard, at least we can amplify their voice, try to help them as much as possible, and get their views in media and in the public. So I think that's what our whole aim was. And I think Ruhi would want to speak a little bit about the campaign.
About EIA specifically, Yash, or others?
Yeah, you can always shuffle, but mainly EIA,
Okay.
because we have like a solid model there.
Yeah, so essentially, with a lot of legal notifications that come from the government, they're full of jargon and legal jargon. So it's really hard to understand. It sounds like any other big, policy being passed, which is really hard to understand. And because it's hard to understand, I think it's hard to translate it for a layman person. And because that doesn't happen, nobody really understands the gravity of the situation. And then because obviously, because nobody's understanding, nobody cares. And then when things get passed in the public, then it's just like, when you see the impact of those policies, it's it's just wondering that why didn't anyone do anything if it was so important and so big. And that's precisely the reason what we're doing with EIA, that we started with the policy breakdown. So environment impact assessment, and what the latest notification means for on an everyday level, and for projects, and for states, and for farmers, fisher folks, indigenous and tribal Adivasi people, for people from different groups. And what we did was we decided to do lots of expert consultations with people who are in the policy space, get many different groups on board, like Fridays for Future, Extinction Rebellion, Save RA, and through our networks, right? And do many different webinars so that people understand that what is it, this document and this new policy that actually means. And once we had established the meaning, we started creating a lot of language diversification in how do we want to post this. So what Jay had mentioned initially, that we make a lot of simple text friendly posts. So we decided to do that in many different languages. We accumulated, remind me, I think it was 12 or 15.
Yeah, 12,
am I
12.
wrong? Yeah,
Yeah.
languages that we got post translated in. We sort of got different people from different regions in the country to actually post disseminate those designs and post in different languages, and draw attention towards the fact that there's something really important that the notification is doing while the country is in lockdown. So I think that's the trajectory we followed. And the response was incredible, because we got a lot of illustrators, cartoonists, other kind of people who use art and creative ways to express this problem on the EIA notification. And that really helped us, because people just speaking policy is very dry and boring. Nobody's going to listen to you. So we got a really sort of unique way of mobilizing people by getting different language content, getting creative ways, and also making sure that we are pushing each other's content. So this is a very complementing space in terms of volunteers and groups. Nobody is competing with each other that this issue is pushed, why not this one? Everybody was trying to work together, because obviously that's what is required when something is so urgent. So on the EIA campaign, that's what we are doing. And I think now it's also still very fresh, because we are still working on a deadline of 30th of June, when the campaign the draft closes. So I think it's really important that we keep up the push. So that's an interesting model that we have tried to do, which is very decentralized, very linear. It's not about like any central people. It's just people coordinating and doing what they can. And I think we had a really nice peak of content, and just different variations. not just like usually how it's in English language, but in many different languages, which is extremely important.
Radhika, would you like to please talk a little about the dilutions and things like that?
Yeah. Assuming that our audience is new to the whole EI debate, so what the EI essentially is it's a process. What it does is it via certain steps that are included in this process, it tries to figure out how much of an environmental damage any project has the capacity to do. And once you have that assessment that हाँ ये project है, mining है या factory है, chemical factory है, this has the potential to do so and so damage. So now that पहले से हमको पता है, we know what to expect, so we can mitigate that destruction of the environment. Not only that, it also has inside the process the capacity to say कि नहीं ये project कोई काम का नहीं है, that it should not go ahead. So you have a lot of process that provides in itself the ability to go and interact with the people who it is going to affect via the public consultation process. And that is one of the most important bits of EI, this public consultation process. So what has happened is the initial draft, the first notification that came, it came in 1994. And since the initial notification, this law, the EI, the process has been diluted over the past many decades, and it has been diluted many times, not just once, not just twice, but many times. And not only has it been the initial notification been diluted, but it has been replaced also. So the 1994 notification was replaced in 2006, and the 2006 notification is being proposed to be replaced by the 2020 draft, which is what we are trying to ask the government to not do. Because it has already been diluted so many times, we are now seeing that now if you dilute it further, you might as well scrap the whole thing. So what has the government basically diluted? It has diluted the public consultation process. Now, why is the public consultation process important? It is important because you are going, the project proponent is going to the people, and it is getting the people to respond. It is giving the people a chance to be a part of the decision-making process, and that is why it is so important. So let's take an example. Say the bullet train, for example, is to come, is to be made, and the bullet train is going to pass through so and so and so and so and so areas. This should require a lot of land acquisition. So, who has land? Farmers have land. Tribals have land. Now, if this land is to be taken away, then should the farmers and the tribals not be consulted? Because then what happens to these farmers and the tribals when the land is taken away, right? So this is what the public consultation process does. It allows the people who are going to be affected to be a part of the decision making process. And this is something that this is one of the things that is going to be diluted. One of the other things that is going to be diluted, and that is extremely worrying, is the environmental clearance certificate that you receive, that a project proponent receives at the end of the EIA process, that can now be received on an ex post facto basis. Now, what that means is that ideally the EIA is to be done before the project begins. In the planning stages, you're supposed to do it, so that you can initially only find out कि ये करना भी है कि नहीं, करना चाहिए कि नहीं, should this project be taken ahead, should it not be taken ahead. So unless and until the project proponent receives an environmental clearance, they're not supposed to go ahead with the project. They're supposed to wait. Now what happens, what is being proposed right now is that the project proponent can actually go ahead with the project. They can begin setting up their units, their factory units or whatever it is, and take the environmental clearance after they have already started. This this is something that flies directly in the face of environmental conservation. Because by the time, what if you decide afterwards? What if the process, the EI process, reveals afterwards that this project is extremely bad, that it will lead to a lot of tremendous amount of destruction and should not have been gone ahead with. But by the time तो आपका जो unit है already set up हो चुका है, destruction जो करना था वो हो चुका है. Case in point, coastal road. Just look at the coastal road project. Horrible project. Should have never been even planning stages में ही वो cancel कर देना चाहिए था. But now see, all that they have started the construction, and the whole thing is now getting destroyed, and there is no replacing it. The rocky shore that they are destroying to make that coastal road, that is around 66 million years old. How can you ever replace that? There is no replacing that. वो एक बार destroy हो गया, वो गया. So things like that can be avoided by using the EIA process. That will not happen if this draft is passed. And there are several other dilutions. One of the other more worrying dilutions is that what has happened, what the EIA notification does is it classifies different projects into different categories depending on how serious of a damage they have the capacity to inflict. So, for example, setting up of a organic farm is not as destructive or as compared to setting up a pesticide farm, right? So they are all categorized into different categories. Now what they've done is they've played around with these categories, and they have removed some seriously polluting industries from the heavier category side and put them into the milder category, which don't require public consultation. So industries like soda ash, acid, pesticides, fertilizers, petrochemical products, all of them have been removed from one category that requires public consultation and put into a category that does not require public consultation. So that is very worrying because, I mean, just the name, right? Acid industries, pesticide industries, they're highly polluting. And you don't need like just one disaster is enough for the unit to pollute the entire, river or the entire farmland or the entire forest. And most often than not, all this destruction is irreversible. There is no, once it is destroyed, it's destroyed. There's no coming back from that. And that is another sort of a dilution that has been proposed with this new EIA draft. And there are several other, this is merely the tip of the iceberg. There are several other dilutions that have been made that are extremely worrying. Yeah, so if you have any specific questions regarding the EIA draft, you can ask.
Others, couple of questions in the chat box. Is it okay? Like if we get that.
Kuman, I think your volume is a little low. I'm not too sure.
I can't hear you.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, it's very low actually.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Is someone asking me something because I cannot hear you?
No. So basically, like we have couple of questions on the chat box or from the audience. Can we take that?
Sure. Mansi, would you like to say something before that?
I don't think so. I think all the points are duly covered. It's just that one thing that the strategy that was mentioned, the word strategy in the entire draft EIA. I'm saying this because we all went through that draft a lot of times. What happened is public consultation won't be taken for the projects that has strategical or strategy value. So what happens is in these projects, right from water stealing industries to hazardous waste releasing industries, everything can come under strategy, and no public consultation will be taken for those projects. So this was just a build up on Radhika's points, and I think that was a quite dangerous addition to that draft. Yeah, over to all the questions now.
Okay. So Yash, can you hear me? Yeah, so we have few questions from the audience. Is that okay if we can take that question, or do you have any other like a team member to speak on this discussion?
No, no, I think that's all. We'll just go to the questions.
Yeah.
I did
Hello.
answer some questions on the chat itself, though.
Yeah, I
But
think
we'll,
Ankita Garg, she has some question. Ankita, can you just unmute yourself and go on with the question? Hello. Hello, Ankita. Yeah, just unmute yourself.
or can one of the hosts unmute her? Cool. Looks like she's unmuted.
Sorry. Hello.
Yes, Ankita, you can go on.
All you people are doing for the environmental impact kind of things. So if there's environmental degradation, what will be its impact on economic activity, etc.? Are you also working on that?
Sure. I mean, actually, we would love to do that. We do that in some cases also. Ruhi or Meher, do either of you want to take this up? Okay. So, like just an
Go ahead,
example.
Yash.
Yeah, just an example. This, if you must have read this in the news, this whole Dibang multi-purpose dam project, which is going on in the northeast. I mean, specific in Arunachal, in the Dibang Valley. It's a pristine area, and apart from the fact that the amount of economic services that the forest provide to us, like be it clean air, clean water, good soil, a habitat for animals and things like that. There is this whole set of how that dam itself is not very economically the best viable project out there. So it's not like I mean, like we said before, most of us are communicators here. Although we do like certain areas, like someone likes legal, someone likes climate change, someone likes air pollution and things like that. Mostly we look out for partners. So for example, in this case in point, we have Manthan, which has done a beautiful research on this with their allies. And I think Radhika, you've read that article. So if you would like to just talk about it a little, the whole economically unviable projects. But I mean, yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, so
yeah, that is something that hits the industries also hard. You have to remind the industries that, see, this is something that you want to do, but maybe in the larger run it will not give you back enough money. So instead of only telling the people affected by projects about how this project is going to adversely affect them, a lot of times we need to hammer the industries as well as the governments. Like for example, in RA's metro shed case, it was told time and again that, hey, this project is not viable if it comes in a pristine area like RA. Again, it's another step of not being viable. So things like that, that's a very important currency in a way in our times, that we all of us try to relate things to economics. So that's a brilliant question, and we also try to take that up again and again. Radhika, if you want to just elaborate, please.
yeah, so all these mega projects, like the bullet train, like the metro projects in like the hydropower plant project, the Italy project, and the Kashang project as well. And not just the Italy and Kashang project, but the overall hydropower sector, right? Which is based in the Himachal area, the northeastern area in the Himalayas, Himalayan valleys. All of their financial viabilities are suspect, and it is not something that is not known, right? I mean, if you just right away, if you Google about the financial viabilities of any of these projects, you find like 100 different articles that talk about it. And in the case of Italy, especially, there has been the government body itself has asked another government body to do a financial viability. And the government itself is saying that ये project करना भी चाहिए क्या? It's probably not going to last. उसका revenue generation is so low. And not only that, in the past, what has happened in India is that our power demand has gone down. As a country, we are not demanding as much power as is being generated. And you have to understand this, that electricity generation is an extremely polluting and environmentally damaging industry. Be it your thermal power plants, be it nuclear, and nuclear is not, before anybody says anything, nuclear is not clean. It is an extremely horrifyingly polluting industry, and one should never, ever, ever, ever consider that as an option. And neither is hydropower plant ecologically viable, because we are told, right, that thermal se zyada hydro is a better way to go because it is cleaner energy. But then your hydropower plants require you to dam your rivers, and damming a river, an entire river, that in itself is a disastrous thing to do for the people who live over there, for the people who depend on those rivers for their livelihoods, and for the overall health of the environment of that region as well. They're just extremely bad. So ये सब चीजें कैसी होती है, जितना आप minimum कर सको उतना minimum करना चाहिए. But that is what is happening. What we are, when we look at something with a motive, with a profit making motive, we forget to account for all or everything that goes into that project, for all the other things that we are paying. See, you don't pay for things just with money. You pay for it with livelihoods. You pay for it with environmental degradation and destruction. So what should happen is that you should account for these things whenever you take these decisions. And coming back to the hydropower industry, then they've been registering losses since the past 10 years. And the government has had to bail them out. They have had to give them financial packages because they've been making so much of losses. So that is one big question that the Etalin project and the Kashang hydropower project have raised. You're not making money out of it. So even employment generation का जो empty logic है कि अरे ये mining नहीं करेंगे तो employment कैसे generate होगा, और ये dam नहीं बनाएंगे तो employment कैसे generate होगा, this ridiculous logic, even that does not hold, because तुम्हारा dam is not profit, your hydropower plant is not profitable in the first place. Anyway, it's not going to generate any employment. So these two projects especially have raised this question of financial viability when it comes to large-scale projects. Even bullet train, for that matter, is not financially viable, and nor are the metro projects financially viable. So these things, before the projects are even proposed, these are the things that should be considered that are not being considered right now. And the question that people should be asking is, why are they not being considered? Why is nobody asking this question, whether it is environmentally viable or not, whether it is financially viable or not? Why are we not asking these questions to our government? That is what we should be asking.
Thanks, Radhika. Thanks, Yash.
Yeah, I think you got your answer.
Yeah.
Ankita, is that your question and answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we will wrap up here. And once again, I would like to thank all the team members. Let India breathe. Hello. Hello.
Thank you, Devida. Yes, we can hear you.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
we can hear
yes. Thank you, Yash. Thank you, Ruhi. Thank you, everyone. And it was a great session. And yeah, I think like we really need to start questioning our sensibilities about the environment and our gender lifestyle. If one start to make a changes, the environment will definitely change. And yeah, like you just yes, you can drop your social media IDs and your website on the chat box. If anyone is really want to join or have any question, they can just reach to you.
Sure. I'll do that. Anyone, I mean, Jay or Mayor, if you want to give any closing notes, please. Meher?
Yeah, I feel like everyone needs to become more aware of what is happening around. Like just in general, read more and be more in tune with what is happening. And it is very difficult, obviously, like Ruhi said, like the kind of jargon that we receive is unimaginable. Like for us also to go through those projects to see, it takes a very long time to understand it. But there are lots of people out there who are trying to do it and trying to make it easier and trying to make a difference. So I just feel like as if all of us do get together and if we can help each other out and we can raise our voices and and we can change the system to make it better for ourselves so that we have more for us and our further generations. Because if you actually look at climate change and associate it with the pandemic that's happening right now, and along with the deforestation projects that are being passed right now without environmental clearances, most of them, if you see, it's gonna lead to a lot of issues for us and for our future generations. So for that, I feel like we need to get together and really help out. And I think that's what I would like to say. Back
Yeah,
to
so Rohit is
you.
asking, do we publish any magazine for spreading awareness? Not really, Rohit. Actually, what we usually try to do is, there are these beautiful sites like Manga Bay India, then, Scroll, Environment, Scroll, Wire. You just go to the sites and put environment and you will get a beautiful lineup of, articles and all that. Then we have obviously Down to Earth, there is CSE, and I hope CSAPR will, soon start a blog section or a magazine section or some publication section where people can come and publish. But a lot of the things that we do are all available on social media. We do have a blog section where we try to be very sure about the things that are coming in. So please do follow us on all our social media. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks CSAPR for this opportunity. Thanks to our team, all of us, and yes, the viewers. If there are any more questions, please feel free to reach out to us on social media.
Thank you, Yash, once
All
again,
right.
and all the participants. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Okay. Bye bye.
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 Bye.